Breakfast Call Dialogue, widening your horizons.
Hi, this is Arlene. We are back again with our ABC Dialogue, or the ASEAN Breakfast Call Dialogue. Today we have a guest who is a senior lecturer at the University Malaya and in the Department of Development Studies. We have Hwok. Did I pronounce it rightly?
Yeah, that's correct. Yes.
So you'll be sharing with us about, although the title is Racism in Malaysia's Workplace, but in actuality it's more about racial discrimination.
Yeah, that's right. I do want to clarify this, and thanks for having me here and for this opportunity to share this research and our findings. This was done, a study that was co-researched with Dr. Muhammad Abdul Khalid. We have focused on racial discrimination, and basically to explore, the incidents, the occurrence of when employers are receive applicants of comparable quality, and one is of one group and one another, and in this case Malay and Chinese, are they systemically more likely to call one group over the other for interview?
Systematically, meaning that
that
consciously or unconsciously doing it?
I think that part, we do not, within this study, generate very much data to explain why it happens. Of course, I mean, people must be, hiring, and so they have to. We have to assume that they are thinking through it, and they are not just, randomly or haphazardly picking people to who they call for interview. So the discrimination here has a specific context in that choosing one group over another when they are of comparable quality, and we need to make sure that the quality is about the same, because I think, as I explain later, how we did the study. But the issues that often arise are that one group is educational attainment on the whole is less than another, and so specifically I think we can just talk about it more frankly, that the Malay graduates educational attainment, if you look at CGPA, I think in the reality is that it is lower than for Chinese graduates. But in this study,
so there's
actually
socio-economic disadvantage in the beginning in terms of education.
Well, I think I think that is a reality, and so one response when the issue of do employers discriminate is that no, they will say, many say, and I think this is valid and probably drawing on their own experience. They will say that, look, the Malay graduates that we that apply for jobs, they have lesser qualifications, they are and I think CGPA, cumulative grade point average, is a key one, is on average lower. What we do in this study is we ensure that the pool of Malay applicants that we have is on par with the Chinese applicants, meaning that they're very high CGPA Malay, low CGPA Malay, high CGPA Chinese, and low CGPA Chinese.
So you try to keep that variable, make sure it's not.
Yeah. This is what we call a field experiment, and we're not just going out to survey and ask people when they will give whatever responses and their own biases, but we actually send real job applications and we observe. So I haven't really fully answered the question. The racism, there's a distinction there, because racism would be one of various explanations for the phenomenon that we are observing, which is racial discrimination. I think it's important that we do not be too quick to judge, and when we observe things where we see that there's differential treatment, to immediately jump on to the conclusion that there is racism. The issue is quite much more complex than that.
Before we delve deeper, What make you and your partner in this research to dwell into this particular area, and also what is your background in a way?
Yeah. Well, I was doing my PhD in economics at the University of Massachusetts a few years ago. I returned to Malaysia in 2010 and to University of Malaya. It was while I was doing the PhD that I was introduced to this kind of study. And right about the same time, I mean, this is constant, but I was able to also find some media, reports where that there were these accusations in the open. So now and again they come in the open about and you have on the one hand accusations against the private sector for discriminating against Malays, and then against the public sector for discriminating against Chinese. And then it tends to descend into the same kind of recycled story about, oh, we don't actually discriminate, blah blah blah, and people are just speaking
and the
from.
topic itself is very emotional to the
Yes,
extent
yes.
that there's
So
no clear
yeah,
facts
so
to
then
back it up.
so I was introduced to this method, which is to do a field experiment. So you don't, so you actually will. It's experiment because you can control for the important variables, and basically it's been done in many countries. So it's a validated method where usually it's about the job application process. And in the US, it's been done for black applicants and white applicants. And then you observe whether one group gets called for interview significantly more than the other group. And so it is an attempt to be objective. I think it's the best available method for doing this kind of study, addressing specific questions. Addressing how and in what forms it happens. But again, it's not fully addressing why it happens. But we want to understand whether it's happening in the first place.
I want to ask the why part,
Yeah.
because when you talk about racial discrimination towards another race, like what constitute a discrimination in the workplace or in employment? Because let's say I choose you over her, and you happen to be a Chinese ethnic and she happened to be a Malay ethnic or Indian. Am I discriminating her, or am I choosing it because I think you are more qualified than her? So what constitutes racial discrimination?
Yeah, it is inescapably a gray area, because there's so many criteria, and if different employers also would be looking out for different things. But if you just take it on a one case by case basis, then it's also very difficult to establish whether it's happening. So an important thing about the study is that we wanted to have a very big sample. But I think more specific to the question, I mean, what are the key? What when we say someone is qualified for the job, then I think employers need to justify that. What are they looking out for? Is it to what extent would the academic qualifications matter? To what extent would
the language
other
skills
things
matter?
Yeah. But again, specific to this study, though, we looked at the application process. So there is it's the selection for interview, right? Whether or not between Malays and Chinese of comparable quality, employers are more likely to choose one for interview. So this is choosing them to meet face to face. And so I think it is addressing some of those questions about discrimination, because you're not giving people a chance to show themselves. And I think there's a lot of imposition of presumption, prejudgments as well, and a lot of I would say there's still a lot of these unknowns, because each employment or each hiring situation is different.
Can you share the methodology and the timeline of your research?
Yeah, okay. I'm glad we're getting to that, because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding, and I think it is also a little bit quite a lot to deal with. So I thank you that I can take a bit of time to explain it. Yeah. So I just want to go back again. Why, or maybe I just say what we didn't do, which is don't just go out and ask people, as employers, do you discriminate? And what kind of answers will we get? We say, oh, well, no. Or ask fresh graduates, have you been discriminated against? And they will not. And maybe they didn't get called for jobs and they feel that way, but they're not fully informed either because they don't know where they stand against the others. So we did this called a field experiment, which is to send what we call fictitious resumes. Fictitious meaning that of names that do not really exist, but that are credible. So that employers will review and are, we hope, good enough that
So
they
the
will be
name
able to call
itself
some.
would predict whether the person is
And
Malay, Chinese,
yes,
or Indian.
yes, that was easy for Malaysia because the naming.
pretty distinct.
Yeah, that's right. In some other places they have to craft, or they just have to put in white-sounding names and black-sounding names. It was very easy for us. But one challenge we had was that we have students, because of our parallel education system, where for like UiTM is exclusively Bumiputra. So we had to ensure that we didn't end up with, because we had to have some. We had to randomize some of this, so that we are not imposing our own judgments. So in terms of the candidates that were sent to particular jobs, what we did was we ensured that there would be 4 applications sent to each job opening that were posted online. And 2 would be Malay, 2 would be Chinese. Mm-hmm. And we wanted to address the question.
Where you send the application to where? JobStreet or any other particular?
Yeah, there were 2,
avenue?
JobStreet and JobsDB.
JobsDB.
And these were jobs for entry level. So, and all the applications we sent were of fresh graduates.
Mm-hmm. Any sector?
In engineering jobs and accounting jobs. So engineering jobs would be predominantly in engineering firms. But accounting would be across the board. So we do have also that capture. And overall we sent 3,012.
Wow, that must be a long timeline.
So yeah, we had RAs, research assistants, who spent 6 months to understand the issue, to send these jobs, and then to wait to record who got called for interview and who didn't.
And the companies, are they local companies or international companies?
Yes. After we had compiled all the data and or after we had completed the job, sending the job, applications process, then we had a list of all the companies that we sent to, and from there we went to profile it based on ownership and control, and we did. Yes, there are Malaysian, and then there's Chinese control, Malay control companies, and foreign control.
There's no Indian control.
Very, very few. Yeah. So this was not a matter of choice, but just the kind of sample that we ended up with. Okay. So getting back to again the study, the process. So we generated resumes. We wanted to address the question, that often arises that, Malay graduates are not selected for interview because their academic performance is lower on average. We ensured that we had in our sample equal number of high Malay CGPA and high Chinese CGPA, low Malay CGPA and low Chinese CGPA.
What is high and what is low?
Okay.
What's the number?
Yeah, it's low was between 2.2 and 3.0, and high, or what we call below average, was 2.2 to 3.0, and then what we termed above average is 3.1 to 3.9. Okay, so we had these 4 categories of above average Malay, below average Malay, above average Chinese, and below average Chinese.
What about the university that these fictitious candidates came from?
Yeah, they were all local Malaysian universities, but including public and private, and including UiTM, Utah as well, which we ensured that these were in, because this is also often part of the discourse that takes place. We excluded the overseas graduates because we had to settle on what would be our benchmark for quality, and that ended up being the CGPA. And we decided that based on a big sample that we had compiled of real resumes, and we found that 3.1 is sort of the middle, so that's how we separated, and then because if we had foreign, and we know, right, that they would be esteemed more highly, they're better regarded, so then we would have this other quality dimension to worry about. So we omitted foreign so that we could really just so that it would be less clouded, and that our benchmark of quality would remain more controlled as the CGPA. But there's also variation, and so we have the older established public universities, University Malaya, University Kebangsaan, University Science, University Putra, and graduates from there, not surprisingly, do better than the other public universities. Utah University, Tunku Abdul Rahman, which is predominantly Chinese, they do better as well. So and these are elements that are also quite validating our study.
What about UITM graduates?
UITM graduates. There's a difference between those who apply to engineering jobs and accounting jobs. For engineering jobs, they actually don't fare too badly, but what we call the callback rate is not so high for accounting. Okay, so maybe I can explain a little bit and getting to the results. Now, the overall findings are that we summarize as what we call the callback rate. So basically for a certain 1,000 resumes that were sent, how many got called for interview, and there is a difference. For every 1,000 Chinese resumes that were sent, 221 get called for interview. For every 1,000 Malay resumes that were sent, 42.
Oh, that's a huge difference.
It's a very big difference, and it's much greater than in other studies. So then we refer to that as a 22.1% callback rate for Chinese and 4.2% callback rate for Malays.
This is both the higher and lower CGPA, or
only for the
higher
that makes it even more interesting. That the gap between Malay and Chinese is less for higher CGPA than lower CGPA. So for Malay higher CGPA, there has a callback rate of 5.2. For Malay lower CGPA, it's 3.2. So it is also showing that the CGPA is important, but the gap between Malay and Chinese, if you are higher, is less. And so there is a certain pecking order, and a Malay graduate with a low CGPA is has a really much harder time getting called for interview. But Chinese with lower CGPA has a better chance of getting called for interview than a Malay with a high CGPA.
And your samples are just Malay and Chinese, not including other races?
Yes. That was with some regret, I have to admit that we felt constrained. Wanted to keep it simple and simpler. And I mean, if you're going to start, at the start of this study, this is the frontier, right? It is primarily a Malay Chinese because of the dynamics, because of the Chinese businesses and their position in various sectors. So we had to start with these two groups. We did think about, for Peninsula, because these jobs are predominantly in Klang Valley, Penang, and Johor. So it's limited to the Peninsula with the Malaysian Indian population. But But it was quite daunting, and we want to keep it simpler and more manageable, and that would entail higher budget, would entail more research assistants, and so on. So we didn't, but I do say that with some regret now. It would have been very interesting, and I kind of wish that we had included a third group. Yeah.
We will take a short break, but when we return back, something that had happened in Old Town will be part of our discussion later on.
ASEAN Breakfast Call Dialogue, widening your horizons.
Hi, this is Arlene.
This is Grace.
And we are back again with our discussion with Hwok Lee. I hope I mentioned it rightly again. And continuing our discussion regarding on the findings.
Mm-hmm.
What else that you want to add more about it?
Yeah, okay. Let me take this chance again to reiterate, right? So what we did was we were observing employers' actual decisions. It's sort of similar to, corruption. You can try to investigate corruption by asking people, oh, are you corrupt? Right? I think it would be more reliable to do a covert kind of study where you observe people's behavior, whether or not they engage in corrupt practices. So similarly, we're doing something like that. It is in that sense a covert operation. We're sending actual resumes, and we're observing basically what people do when nobody's watching, essentially, in the privacy of their own offices. So I would stand by its validity, and of course it has limitations, but a lot of strengths as well. And among its limitations is that, after this extensive work, which is addressing particular questions, in what does it happen, discrimination, and in what forms, we don't generate the kind of data to answer why it happens. And I know there's a lot of dissatisfaction about that, and I understand that, and I acknowledge that we acknowledge that as a limitation. But this study shouldn't be judged for the questions that another study is needed to answer. Now, I can get to a few more additional findings because I think this is also helping to diffuse the situation a bit. It's very emotional. It's just a flammable issue. And so among the things that we find, like one of those is that job ads that post, Chinese as a job requirement. And
this is in relation with what happened recently that went viral regarding on a franchise of Old Town that advertised the need to hire only Malay and Chinese as the preferred candidate and not Indian. And surprisingly, the one that did the hiring was an Indian. So what does it tell you in a way?
Well, it tells. I mean, if you look at, I think the reactions to that, it tells that it's just such a hot button issue that when Malaysians see it, they just tend to really leap to certain assumptions. But I think it's unwise to put that in the job ad, and I think we need a national conversation, and we need some laws to clarify what is permissible, what is advisable, and what is not.
What if it's in another country, let's say a developed country, it would be something that unthinkable. Companies that do discriminate either overtly or discreetly would usually they practice workplace diversity. But in the Malaysia's case, it's quite common to see only Chinese sales girls wanted or only Muslim Malay sales girl wanted. So what does it say about the situation, the employment situation in this country?
Yeah. Well, again, I don't want to, and I think we shouldn't be too quick, to judge. I mean, for some organizations, they're already quite saturated with people from one group, and they may truly want to diversify. I am more, I think, you could say, sympathetic in that someone who truly wants to discriminate and does have those kind of prejudices, why would they want to expose themselves and put these things in the job ad? And our findings, the study is showing that I think it is quite legitimate. These are legitimate job requirements, especially the language, because we find that Malay-controlled companies as well. About 10% of Malay-controlled companies were posting Chinese as a job requirement. Chinese language as a job
You
requirement.
mean Mandarin?
Yes. So it's not like it's not it's not this caricature and stereotype of a Chinese company puts up Chinese as a job requirement so that they can exclude everybody else, right? I mean, I don't see it happening in that way. I think if people do that, it's largely legitimate. And I have also seen people have reacted when it was Chinese is preferred to blog posting in a job ad, and they screamed racism, and there was a note at the bottom of that job ad that said that travel within East Asia will be required, right? So I think we should give the benefit of doubt in such situations, that this is a job that requires you to travel in China and to communicate with Chinese people, and if you don't have the language, then you wouldn't be able to fulfill the job requirements.
You have a question?
Yes, like you said, like few companies, they will advertise to hire different races. Like for example, Chinese company may want to hire Malay spoken people because of there are also based on their experience with the Malay workers, they may want to hire more Malay people because based on their performances in the company. So it's not so much about the discrimination when it comes to hiring people. To me, it's more like the efficiency that the one race can carry, and also what the company wants to focus on. Like let's say if it involves the traveling, then maybe a Malay majority companies may want to hire Chinese spoken people, and vice versa.
Yeah, I think with services, that is job requirement. But I think it's these practices. I think as I said, we need to have a bit more clarity, and I think a bit more tact in how, because once they put out in the open, then it just generates these reactions.
But definitely how the public receives the information from the company, they will feel a bit offended because how they put it up on the.
So I think we should just we shouldn't put, and probably should maybe even not allow wording it that way. I mean, how it's worded it matters.
Yes.
And we should have an institution, some kind of a commission, Fair Employment Commission, Equal Opportunity. I mean, we can talk about how it should be constituted, that will be overseeing this and conducting audits and so on, instead of people, instead of being audited or being monitored by social media, which doesn't have access to any of the company's information, is not interviewing the company, and making all kinds of judgments, and prejudgments. But I think one consideration is, because I think it makes a difference, just to, if you say, and maybe we can just talk gender, just to, calm it down a little bit. But women are encouraged to apply, because I think companies are trying to reach out. And one strategy is you indicating who you're looking for. And if you are looking for more women, you could say, we prefer women, or you could say women are encouraged to apply. You would, I think, have a different, you would generate a different impression about the company. You would avert, I think, the kind of over-the-top reactions to some extent, and yet it's being true to that. Now, and we so I think we need to have some kind of code of best practices, as well as some laws about what is permitted and not. But then ultimately, there needs to be some process for monitoring and enforcement, whereby cases can be brought against companies, or there will be random checks and audits.
Do you recognize that there are racial privileges in Malaysia? That means that certain race, regardless of the qualification, has somehow more privilege than the others just because he or she is in that particular racial skin tone?
Well, that's putting it very strongly. I think I would go back.
Based on your research, do you feel that by being a certain race, you actually have much more advantage than the other race, even though you might have the same kind of qualification? I mean, this might not be a conscious or unconscious decision, but it is something that you know, is
yeah. So
ingrained in
okay,
you.
yeah. I think I'm glad you put it that way because again, it's not you know, we cannot reduce it to or trace it to racism, but whether a certain
Racial
race may have
privilege.
privilege. Yeah. I think this study is showing, you know, if a Malay graduate, even with a CGPA above 3.5, has less chance of getting called for interview than a Chinese graduate with a CGPA of 2.6, then, as we do find, then, you know, this is reflecting
Based on
privilege.
your hypothesis, why certain race have more privilege than the other? What is the criteria, like reasons?
Well, I think workplace, you know, social compatibility is one strong inference that we can draw. And we know that many of the companies involved in this, companies that we had sent the resumes to in this study, they are, you know, Chinese, you know, through and through. Even when we registered whether they got called for an interview, then we received calls from the company, right? And you know, they were not speaking English, the manager or human resource person. So I think they are you know, very acutely attuned to the importance of the workplace, and they may not call a Malay because Malay would probably not fit in, or even if you when they come for the interview, they will see that this is a place that will be very difficult for them. And these may be smaller companies. I think we need to also, you know, draw this, be sensitive and be understanding that the scope for companies to diversify, which I think is, if, you know, a desirable objective, but a small company would be much more limited in their ability to do that. And companies that are very family-based, you know, would tend to also, in their socially and in their business, I think also, you know, be more confined within the community for Chinese business that operates, you know, very much interacting with other Chinese businesses as well. So yeah, I mean, but you know, further, I mean, I want to highlight a few other of the findings, which is that the preference for Chinese, we found that it also we observed that in Malay controlled companies as well, that they seem to be regarding Chinese graduates, you know, a bit more highly. Again, even when they're comparably qualified. So it is much more than we often make it out to be. Not so clear cut. Chinese companies, you know, excluding Malay graduates.
This is when it comes to race in Malaysia, it is always a very emotional topic. And when you presented your paper last year, it created a huge buzz. In fact, people were criticizing it.
Yeah.
Why people were criticizing the research?
I think many didn't fully understand, and I think maybe some of the reports, I think, you know, were not really fully capturing it. But largely, people just saw the headline and then straight away, you know, jumped to their preconceived conclusions, because most of the reporting did say that, you know, were highlighting how we had control for the quality of graduates.
Some felt that they were part of the victims, and this proved their point.
Yeah.
And some deny it, say that, this research is flawed. Do you agree with any
I think,
of the
I'm
comments?
noticing more, I guess, those who were criticizing and were pointing out that it's flawed. I mean, some you know, that were a bit more substantial and that they wrote longer pieces. But even then, they were criticizing it again for the questions that we were not really able to answer. They were saying that, this study is flawed because you didn't answer why. But they didn't ever engage with the whole process of the study, our method. And they were saying, well, if you ask employers, they will tell you something different. Well, that's not the way you should study this subject. You should, I think we have a far better way of studying it. So no one has offered really a very substantial criticism of the method that we used. They just seem to be quite unhappy with the findings. And I think, so the misunderstanding is because even after it's presented, a lot of the criticism, stems from their own experience or impressions, which is that, Malay graduates are less qualified. And they maintain that in their criticism, oblivious to the fact that in the study we ensured that we had equally high qualified Malay graduates, and even then, they are not getting as much the call for interview. So it's just, I think, again, you're completely right. It's very emotional, and I think people's minds are already very much made up, or they don't want to look beyond their experiences. I think for some they are, people who are well intentioned. I think so. I would give them the benefit of doubt that they do not discriminate, and maybe they're upset that they were not sampled. But we can't just also, choose who are we going to sample. We applied to the jobs that were available over this period of time, and we got a very big sample of 753 companies, 3,012 applications. So we have, I would stand by. We have a pretty solid basis for our findings.
This is one of the very few research that researchers actually conducted in terms of trying to understand racial discrimination in the workplace. But of course, when it comes to conversation on the ground, there are people who complain that there are discrimination in the housing, in the workplace, in many other public spaces.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, will you be conducting further research on this just to get more answers out of?
You're bringing up one. It was another limitation. We did want to apply to public sector jobs as well, but we were not able to. And there are very few they're none advertised on the portals that we had applied to. It would just be too difficult process, having to go through Jobs Malaysia and so on. So we had to make a decision, and I think the numbers probably would not be sufficient as well, because for graduates, the vast bulk are teaching positions. So we had these engineering and accounting resumes that we were sending. So it's unfortunate. But one reaction is on one level understandable, that people feel that there is discrimination in the public sector, and that is a policy. Now it's not so it's not so explicit, but the NEP did say that in the job market, in employment, the workforce should resemble the certain quota system, population, the composition of the population. I think quotas were implemented perhaps more explicitly in the past, but now it has its own momentum, right? Because it's very much a Malay Bumiputera domain, and it's difficult for others to enter, not necessarily because of discrimination, but because they would, because again, it's the same kind of dynamic in companies that are very Chinese populated. It's difficult for others to enter for social compatibility, culture, and language, and similarly for non-Malays entering the public sector, there are those kind of social and cultural barriers as well. But given the fact that it does positive discrimination in the public sector does not mean that there's no discrimination in the private sector. I think it's very unfortunate, it's very unhealthy, it's quite destructive that we have these two sides who are mutually accusing each other. Oh, you private sector, you discriminate from one angle. Public sector does not discriminate. And then on the other side, oh no, private sector doesn't discriminate. You public sector, on the other hand, you discriminate. When can't we just accept that it may happen, and as we find here, it does happen? in both, and just have, just tone it down and just have a more, objective and constructive dialogue about it. And that's the purpose of this study. We wanted to be able to inform, to offer something that was empirical, that was objective, that was reliable, and avoiding, all this other emotional baggage.
Just one question. Let's say the decision to hire this race compared to another race is purely is unconsciously done. It's not like you purposely wanted to hire that particular race compared to this, but you just do it because out of other reasons. That if we were to move forward to practice workplace diversity, how can we do that?
Yeah, you bring up a important challenge. I mean,
if it's it's an overtly conscious decision to hire another race compared to this race, then it can be deemed as racial discrimination. But what if it's unconscious, unconsciously done?
I think it's a good point that, again, it's not that people are very, it's not racism in its most blatant form, and it may not be at all. And it's just that, you go with people in a particular, particular network. I mean, connections matter so much.
I just give one example. Yeah. For example, there are certain jobs where they would rather hire, for example, a Chinese compared to an Indian because their clients are majority Chinese. And it's obvious their clients are majority Chinese because when you look at the socio-economic standards in this country, Indians are far less in terms of socio-economic strata compared to the Malay and Chinese. So how
I think policy, I think, it's just not just in this, but in general, policy can be more punitive. That means you're trying to punish and enforce, laws against unacceptable or undesirable or illegal behavior, and then you could try and offer some incentives. I think it's a bit, and then of course you could also do things like, just persuade and have, try to engage people to do something for the public good. But I think this is calling out for our study, and I think because the dialogue is so heightened and the issue is important for a law, fair employment perhaps is one way to look at it, because firstly it's not just about enforcement of the discrimination equal opportunity, but we have to we have to maneuver around the current situation where we do have preferential treatment in the public sector, right? And we cannot have just a law that is only for private sector and not including public. So something that will help move the nation forward, both public sector and private sector, in my view, would be necessary. And from the enforcement perspective, we need to clarify, what are the acceptable practices and what are not. So putting job language requirement in the job ad. In some countries, probably that's not allowed. We need to decide whether that should be allowed. Whether we prefer to hire this group, or you are encouraged to apply, that sort of thing. Or maybe we should just say that, agree that we should pursue diversity. And so if you're going to do that in the job ad, you put this is a company that is in favor of workplace diversity. Now, whether they do that or not is another matter, but how you would monitor that should be up to an established and legally formed institution, and not social media. So they could, which would have random checks, as well as an avenue for people to report any grievances or any issues, right? So some kind of a statutory commission would be established together with fair employment law, for instance. But that's just on the prohibiting bad practices side. It's not going to shift towards promoting some of the good practices. It's a bit limited. I mean, you could offer that if you're and countries do this, what kind of carrots can you offer? Well, procurement is government procurement, licensing. If you want to qualify, you can get additional points based on how you have diversified your workplace. And I must add here, in terms of the laws on discrimination, it's not just about race. We'd be about gender as well, discrimination against
So there's
age,
a lot of things that
disability.
there's
I
a
mean,
lot
all
of
of this.
factors that
Yeah,
need to be corrected.
yeah.
But usually race is
Well,
the
it's
one that is more emotional.
Yes.
compared
But
to others.
yeah. But I think it would certainly help mature and diffuse the heat of the conversation, the debate, that it's about workplace discrimination in general, which encompasses race and ethnicity and gender.
Unfortunately, we are at the end of our show now. Thank you very much for sharing with us. And perhaps we might have another more session if there's more information to talk about.
Okay, well, thank you very much again for this
Thank
opportunity.
you.
Thanks.